You know what's interesting about today's news? So I've been getting calls constantly. Always get calls. What are you and John going to do when you run out of content? What are you and Sal going to do when you run out of content?
Yeah.
You know, content. We have so much content, we don't even know what to do with it. That's where we're at right now. So let's talk about the NYPD Beauty Pageant. Are you surprised by this? So sure enough, Stephenson at the upper echelon of the police department, one of Madry's monsters, he's at the forefront of this right now. So apparently in the NYPD, there was a Christmas party in December of 2023 where Stephenson was holding a beauty contest for the best dressed female at this Christmas party. Now, I've been to Christmas parties before, Sal, especially with the police department. We've had Lieutenant of the Year, we had Supervisor of the Year, maybe Cop of the Year. I mean, fraternal organizations, they have Man of the Year. What do you think about best dressed? What are your thoughts when that comes to mind? Best dressed female at a Christmas party. What are your immediate thoughts?
And an NYPD party, I don't know what business that, I don't know how that gets by officially through, you're having an NYPD party and that would have to go through, integrity control officers, EEO, legal. And the question is, how does it get by all of that? Just like we've, stated in the past when we were talking about a shuttered establishment in the Bronx, that how do you get past all these, entities you have to get through to get to a party and have something like that. In this instance, they're saying that the EEO approved this, but legal has no idea. So right there, you have a contradiction of itself. And I actually cover this on my show later on with Serena Townsend. We discussed this whole part where how do you get EEO to say this is okay when technically it's sexual harassment from the start? But again, look at the characters that are involved. You got Ruel Stephenson there, who's a buddy of Phil Banks. And by the way, just so people don't know, especially some low information people that want to call me a buffoon in the comments, Jeffrey Madry and John Schell were at this very party. I don't know why they're not named as defendants, but that is a fact. And you could actually look that up. And apparently, Jeffrey Madry was a judge at this party. So a judge for this $700 reward. So I don't know what why the theme of these individuals, the crumbs, crew, whatever you want to call them, they always do the same things in the same places, no matter where it goes. This is disgraceful, and I don't know how this got past EEO or the legal bureau, really, because this should have never even happened. You want to have a party, it's different than having a contest like this. This is sexual harassment.
I gotta laugh because we used to always say in the NYPD, the more that you get promoted, the better looking that you get, right? And I tell you what, these guys are at the point where they think they're all Don Juan. The upper echelon of the police department thinks they're the best looking thing walking. I mean, this is honestly, when you read the title, NYPD chief offered $700 to best dressed female underling that retaliated against cop who refused to participate suit. You gotta laugh. I mean, it sounds like some dirty old men that, hey, you know what? We got the power. We're the bosses. Let's hold a best dressed. And let's be honest. What do we mean by best dressed female? We're not asking them to come in suits, right? We're asking them to come in some scandalous outfits so you guys can get your rocks off at a party and use your power and influence to have the ability to do that. These guys are, honestly, they're a joke. They're a bunch of clowns. It's absolutely ridiculous. And even if they didn't have any ill intentions to gawk over these women, it's just plain stupid at this point. I mean, this upper echelon, this administration, we're talking about December 2023, already the appearance of impropriety had already been seeped out to the public about this upper echelon. We didn't have all the, the underlining, silver lining information about Jeffrey Madry. But I've said a long time ago, Jeffrey Madry is the wolf in sheep's clothing. He's the one that created all these monsters. And I heard the same thing. I heard that it was Madry that was present at this party actually judging it. Tom makes a great comment here. That's just how you know these guys are just plain stupid. He says where they went, I got to laugh at this comment, where they went wrong was not having the sharpest dressing man too. If they had both, it wouldn't have been bad. Well, it wouldn't have been as bad, right? At least at this point, you kind of justify and say, hey, we had a best dressed contest for both genders. mean, I don't know. What's next? We're going to have Two-Spirit, best dress for Two-Spirits. And Deuces 300 says, did the winner get first grade with 0 collars? That's a great question. So I think it's quite interesting, right? So in this article, it indicates how this particular female lieutenant was eventually targeted because she didn't want to partake in the festivities of this particular contest. And it says that it got to the point that when Stephenson would hold meetings with the NYPD and this lieutenant was present, that she was berated, embarrassed, and humiliated at these meetings because she refused to partake in this best dressed NYPD beauty pageant contest. What are your thoughts on that? Do you believe her? Do you not believe her? Do you think there's any teeth to this? Because in the article, it goes further to say, right? I think this is part of the article. It's kind of like smear her a little bit and defame her, that she has a prior lawsuit where she sued a fellow cop that was a boyfriend of hers, where a relationship went bad. So what are your thoughts on this immediately? Before we go into that, amazing aunt, shout out to you, $9.99 coffee and donuts. Here we go. Good morning, truth tellers, Eric and Sal. The Auto Pound does the best dressed female at their annual Christmas party. A member of the service went 1 year, refused to go back, launched to midnights. So apparently this is, I never even heard of this in the NYPD. Thank you, amazing aunt. I had no idea. I've never been to a Christmas party where they did this. I do know, Sal, and you know this, that in many commands, and depending on what your position is in that command, there is pressure put upon you to attend these Christmas parties. But what are your thoughts on this female best dressed?
It's a horrible idea from the get-go. And I do think that she was harassed at the meetings because actually in her own allegations, I believe she mentions a supervisor, that another supervisor told her something about, the meetings and what Stevenson was snickering. Because I believe that where she was at the precinct, that's the Brooklyn North headquarters as well, which is why you would even have any of these interactions. So, this is like sexual harassment seems to be like a theme of the Eric Dym administration. It seems to be a problem everywhere you go. Most of these people that are in the circle of the Eric Dym's cronies have an issue. So when you look at all the lawsuits that are being laid out, sexual harassment, it kind of same theme, same pattern, and then there's the retaliation on top of it because you're not giving in or you're not going along with the program. So and you see it where now it's in this command in Manhattan North. We know it's in the Bronx. You know about it in One Police Plaza. You hear about it also in other offices, this shady office they had with Tim Pearson in it. So it's a pattern. It's all over the place. It's very disturbing. And it's a reflection of the mayor himself, who somehow is entrenched in the middle of everything. And this should have never happened. And I know how it is because we were all there. You get pressured to go to these stupid Christmas parties where I don't know why you would. I don't see why you have to attend some kind of end of the year party. Like, it's bad enough that I was a guy just want to come in and go to work. I'm not necessarily your best friend. I don't drink. So I don't know where we're going to, what this all entails, like huddling up together at some fancy place where, by the way, you got to pay for things too. So I know some cops that were like pressured into giving, they weren't going to go, but they paid for a seat. There was pressure. I'm not one to cave to pressure. So I never saw, why, what is the plus of going to one of these parties? Because usually you hear about all these issues at the end of the year and the NYPD happen at these parties. This thing just happens to be a very egregious one. But, a few years ago, you had the guy that was, remember, he came drunk. I think he took the RMP, which is the police vehicle. He drove it drunk or something after the party. There was a big thing with that. There was the lap dance from the 4-4, that party. I mean, it's always something you hear. I don't see the benefit of having something like this. You could always have a quiet thing,
John Magnani actually referenced to it. He says, I guess the Christmas party lap dances have evolved. You're right. And that's why I say the upper echelon of this administration, while there is appearance of propriety, there's corruption probe going on, there's no doubt about it. We pretty much have some overwhelming evidence that there's a vast amount of corruption going on at the upper echelon. But one thing I can tell you about that, let's put aside this corruption probe. These guys are plain stupid. Plain stupid. You had a Christmas party in the 4-4 precinct a few years ago that made the public eye, where a female police officer was completely berated. Her whole appearance was destroyed because she gave a lap dance to a lieutenant, and they made this more than what it is. We don't know the full context of it. Were they joking around? But the bottom line is, what was stupid is you have to be smart. The upper echelon has to be smart, because the cops at this party actually leaked that information. They're stupid. First of all, if you're going to go to a party like that and play these kind of games, you should tell everybody, put your phones away. Now, I'm not saying it's right, but you got to be smart. And these guys are just plain stupid. But when you're having a Christmas party that's NYPD operated and monitored, you're going to have a best dress just for females. You don't think the appearance of that alone just looks ridiculous? Marlon had made a comment here. Marlon, I agree with you. Marlon says, how could Stephenson not think this wasn't going to be an OEEO complaint? That's why I'm saying the upper echelon is just so stupid. Patrick Jordan, shout out to you, our friend from LA County Sheriff's Chief. How many officers did these chiefs discipline for sexual harassment? That's a great point. Who are they disciplining for sexual harassment when they themselves peddle and influence the most amount of sexual harassment? Jeffrey Madry's monsters around him. And Stephenson, make no mistake about it, Jeffrey Madry is one of his mentors. He's part of that entire circle that brought him in. Absolutely disgusting. But they just played stupid. Rich Rod, shout out to you, brother. $20 coffee and donuts. Says, good morning and happy Monday morning, everyone. Another great show, guys. Thank you so much. So, Sal, what are your thoughts on that as far as the stupidity of it? Do you believe that that's corruption? Do you think they're just stupid? Do they sound like dirty old men? I think they sound like creeps. Like, and yet they'll embarrass these women. Because I worked with a female sergeant in PSA 7, and she was completely destroyed publicly. She got caught shoplifting. Now, I'm not saying it's right, but they took pictures of her where she was dressed at some of these Christmas parties that were kind of scandalous pictures, right? She was kind of top heavy, if you know what I mean. And they put those pictures everywhere, and they really just annihilated her and totally abused her. And no one protected her. So what do you think is going to happen with these pictures at this Christmas party? I think it's absolutely insane. They're stupid. That, to me, this girl has – the bottom line is this lieutenant has a lawsuit. I know they want to try to spear her, say there was some other lawsuit. Maybe she's trying to target to get money. But to me, the appearance is there. I would like to know what kind of text messages were involved. Was he texting her, hey, you're going to look good? What are you going to wear? I wouldn't be surprised. What do you think about that? Do you think there's text messages with this? How far do you think internal affairs will go? Because this is now the upper echelon of the police department. We're not talking about the lower ranks, if any. What do you think the Internal Affairs Bureau will do?
We're going to see what they do because, as you know, they were hiding a lot when it comes to when Miguel Iglesias was in charge, which happened underneath him. Because, see, here's a theme here, which, again, people should be focused on. EEO, the Office of Equity and Inclusion. Remember, the head of that is Wendy Garcia, who is also being investigated by the feds right now for her role in basically getting rid of every EEO complaint that had some kind of ties to nepotism or cronyism involving one of the upper echelon or one of their ilk. And, and here's someone, J Creations NY, $9.99 for espresso and bagels. Worked with her in transit, treated me well. What I will say is that she is smart and knows her stuff and never had a problem calling the higher ups on their BS. So you see, here's somebody, and here's someone who's saying, this woman is not one to go along with the program. So the next step for them would be, we have to destroy them. And we've seen this pattern with everyone, right? Whether it was Latina, these are people that sued the NYPD for sexual harassment. You had Latina Brown. We have Dana Ratchlin, who's been absolutely ostracized for her complaint. We had that sergeant with Tim Pearson, right? You had there was the heads there, the inspector of that unit, that he got destroyed. His career was basically over. So you see a pattern of retaliation if you either know about or try to defend or tell them, look, what you're doing is wrong, or you don't go along with the program. So, and it's a repeated pattern. Even the woman that sued Eric Adams for sexual harassment from 30 years ago in transit. She was a transit aide, PEA, and he's saying she's a liar, she's this, she's that, but she happened to work with him in the transit guardian. So they have a problem, and one of the problems is that the EEO office was covering this kind of stuff up. And they did it for certain people while others they made a big deal about. And you can't do that. And that's the issue here with this party in particular. You're saying EEO approved this, which means Wendy Garcia, another frequenter, by the way, of Con Frito, where this kind of stuff was going on all the time. So Wendy Garcia should be in the forefront. I don't understand why she's not being named as a defendant here, nor Jeffrey Madry, who was there in person as a judge. So that means that the chief of department gave you the nod on top of it. So the fact that it involves all these high-end people, again, in this party doing this stupid thing and approving this just shows there's a lack of integrity from anyone on top. On top of this, whether it's the administration itself or the New York State Police Department, there's like zero integrity. And I keep pointing out that, as a cop, you might come into work and wear white socks and get charges and specs over that. Whereas if you were over here sexually harassing someone and it's a high-ranking person and his crew, the cronies, nothing happens to you. That is a big, drastic problem. And this is why the morale is in the toilet in the New York City Police Department. Because if you're just a person that comes in, wants to do their job and go home, you go to work, you might get trounced on. Forget about stomped. You're going to get trounced. Whereas if you are part of this crew doing all kinds of borderline criminal stuff, nothing's going to happen to you. It's just like a gangster in a badge, wearing a badge. That's all.
You got the finest Unfiltered family. John couldn't make it today. And, of course, Sal Greco was kind enough to step in. So like, share, and subscribe. If you like the content, we appreciate it. Again, like, share, and subscribe. Shout out to Jesse James, $4.99 coffee and donuts. And for my man Sal, Paisan, what is it, espresso and bagels? Bagels and cream cheese?
Yeah, it's espresso and bagels or cappuccino and bagels. So no coffee.
$4.99. The supervisors in certain, think about this, the supervisors in certain units or details were basically forced to sell tickets to their cops or they would be booted out of their spots. That's a great point, Jesse James. Shout out to you. So think about it. You're a supervisor or you're in these commands, and we know the people that would actually sell the tickets. There was a lot of pressure on them to have all these tickets sold, to have everyone show up to these Christmas parties. But think about it. If you're aware of this $700 trophy for best dressed female at your Christmas party, you might think to yourself, man, I don't want to sell these tickets. Do I want to be involved in this? Especially if you're a female sergeant that's actually selling this tickets. Like, it's almost like why don't we just start an OnlyFans page with the NYPD at this point? I mean, this is ridiculous, right? And you know what's interesting? I just want to reflect on this, right? So I don't know if you know, I spent a lot of time in Asia, but I've studied a lot on the Asian culture. I was a history major in college, and I studied the history in Japan and China. And in Japan, there is a culture, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, there's a culture where people work, that it's considered part of the job, that certain days of the week, after work, everyone goes out and has a beer together. And that's considered part of your job. And it's kind of frowned upon if you don't show up. In order to get promoted, move up, it's considered part of your day to mingle and be part of a social club in connection to the job. And I get it, right? Because you want to build relationships, but you want to build relationships. I'm not saying it should be boring. It should be fun, but to the point where, we're basically utilizing these women to gawk at them because you can. I mean, if these guys never got promoted within the NYPD, you think a bunch of women are getting dressed up for these clowns? I mean, come on. Jeffrey Madry is not exactly Don Juan, and neither are any of these folks. I know some of these folks love themselves and think they're the most amazing thing, God's gift. But what do you think as far as this party actually going through? Don't you think Internal Affairs should have intercepted this before they actually had this function? What are we doing here? We're having a best-dressed female contest? We know how bad it could be. Most females probably don't want to partake in it, but let's be honest. There's probably a couple that want to take that opportunity to show off. Maybe they'll take off a little more clothing than they should because they want to get that first-grade detective, right? Let's be honest. There's two different types of females. Some females will say, I don't want no part of this. And some women will be like, you know what? I'll take the opportunity and I'll get myself promoted. But Internal Affairs should have intercepted this before it even got to this point. Again, another failure on Internal Affairs. We proved it. Sal, you, Marlon, myself, and John, we've debunked and proved that the Internal Affairs Bureau is not there to investigate the upper echelon. It's to protect the upper echelon and deflect it to lower ranks within the police department. There's a New York Times article that just came out. Here's another appearance of impropriety. where Stephenson is actually noted and actually indicated in this particular article. And in this article, it talks about a bootlegging operation. And I'd like to read this to you. And somehow information that leads out. In the New York Times article, check it out. It's a good article. It says, a gregarious man born in the Dominican Republic, Mr. Peralta, 39, was friends with several officers from nearby precincts. Men who called him bro and regularly texted him with gossip. In April 2013, 2 months after getting the tipster's letter, Internal Affairs sent undercover detectives to speak with him at his restaurant. This is going back to 2013. According to court papers, the detectives pretended that they wanted Mr. Peralta's help with an outstanding ticket. Mr. Peralta told them that he had a very good relationship with Inspector Stephenson and trying to be helpful, passed along his number. And it actually goes further into this article, and it says that Stephenson is known as a corrupt commander. Now, I'm not saying that he is, but there is an allegation in the New York Times article. And I don't think the New York Times would actually put out information unless they really had some teeth to it. The New York Times, in many cases, they do go left with a lot of information, but they do try to get fact-based information. And the preponderance of evidence is usually there when they put something out. What are your thoughts on this New York Times article that talks about a bootlegging operation? Let me just give you some background information to this. So apparently there was a bootlegging operation that went from New York to New Hampshire and Massachusetts, distributing all kinds of untaxed cologne, liquor bottles, things like that. And somehow there was a connection to Reichberg, right, who's now serving 48 months in prison, who's part of the robbery case with who? Unindicted co-conspirator Philip Banks. And apparently in this New York Times article, Stephenson was also mentioned as a corrupt commander. So again, the more appearance of impropriety, why would you, if there's an appearance of impropriety and fingers already being pointed at you, why would you have a best dressed female contest and have more eyes on you than there already are? Because they're all stupid. That's the problem. What are your thoughts, Sal?
I remember this story well because this is like the original Conso Frito before they came up with that concept in the Bronx. This place was on the 2-8 precinct, I believe. It was when you spin in under the FDR when you come off. That was the nightclub. It was right down on that strip underneath there. I remember it well because that was a spot that many people came out stumbling DWI, and certain people come out and they go, do you know who I am if you pull them over? So this was a spot, and Stephenson was the main guy in the middle of it, where this nightclub was like an untouchable place, but yet you wonder why. And then so many people were involved, including the Reichberg guy and Banks. And that's the only reason he still kept his job, besides the fact that maybe they're all pictured as Freemasons, apparently. That's another conspiracy. You had a picture of Stephenson and Madry and Eric Adams and Jeffrey Madry and Caban. They were all pictured at some Freemason meetings. So a lot of people hit me with that. I don't know what that really means because I don't know about Freemason conspiracy stuff. But this nightclub, I remember it well. And there was so much mishigas going on there. It reminds me of the latest thing that was going on in the Bronx. It's the same kind of stuff. So, and Stephenson was the central figure. And I actually forgot, somebody wrote in the comments about Captain Gabby Walls. That's someone I know. I came up through, when I was a rookie, she was a sergeant for us and Impact. And also, we also worked with Juanita Holmes at that time. She was also a sergeant. And what's funny is the career path of one Gabby Walls and Juanita Holmes, where Juanita Holmes went on to become, what is she? She was the head of the academy. And and Gabby Walls is meanwhile as being, she's up there in Manhattan North or whatever. And, there's never any chance for a promotion for Gabby Walls. But Juanita Holmes just skyrocketed through the ranks. And that just to show you, because at the same time, they were both sergeants. Both were pretty nice with all of us, especially rookies. And then as time went on, Gabby more than Juanita Holmes, I'd say. And I know Gabby's family. And what she's saying, I think is 100% true, because she had to leave the precinct when Madry was around and Inspector Henderson. So, again, it's the same crew doing the same things, and they just think they can do whatever they want. We see EEO only steps in certain situations. They don't step in on everything the way they should be doing. And what you went back to and you said legal, right? You did a party, you mentioned there was a 1013 party. And you, Eric, said you had to go through the steps and you had to get approvals, and it took a while just to put on the party.
Through internal affairs. Through internal affairs, Sal.
So how do you get this through? Or how do you get all those other fraternal parties through, especially at Conso Frito, where everything and anything was going on, or Zona de Cuba, or any of these places where, Zona de Cuba had an incident where a woman was raped by 2 cops. That place is still open, by the way. That would shut down anyone else. If you're the common guy that had cops raping your patrons, you're not going to survive that. But Zona de Cuba, who had Fernando Mateo as one of the owners, survives. That's a good friend of Eric Adams. So that shows you what's going on here. And you got to focus in on what the hell is illegal. Why is legal not doing anything about all these stupid parties? And maybe now might be different under the red herring there, the billionaire Harris, Jessica Tish, who never does anything. It's all rearranging the furniture. But in this time frame, what we're looking at, and for many years, we wonder how these parties and all this stuff gets put through, and legal just sits there and has no problem. Because in fact, in that article, it says legal said they had no idea. They never have an idea with this stuff, but they had an idea about your party, Eric. That's funny.
I gotta laugh. Richie O, shout out to you in 1999. More coffee and donuts for Sal Greco. It's espresso and bagels, paisan. Leaders lead, and people will naturally follow bosses. Have to threaten because they are not leaders. Let me read that again, because now I see the context is different. Leaders lead, and people will naturally follow bosses. Bosses have to threaten because they are not leaders. You're absolutely right. Leaders are also hold strong to what's right. Bosses cave. That's a great point. That's funny you say that, Richie. Shout out to you, because I used to tell, cops when they would transition to sergeant, and I would say, "Do you want to be a leader, or do you want to be a boss?" And there is an absolute difference. I always say I'd much rather be a leader, because as a leader, you are a boss, but you can be a boss and not necessarily a leader. And my pet peeve always, what really would irk me, and I would just totally cringe, is when sometimes certain sergeants would give directives and a cop would ask, right? And I would say the reason why the cop is asking a question, one, they're either disrespectful. Most of them are not, right? If you have a level of respect. The second reason why they ask questions is because you left them in the dark. You weren't clear and concise with your directive. And so sometimes those sergeants, because they're insecure, instead of actually explaining to the cop so that the message is actually clear, they point to their stripes and they go like this. And I used to say I have a problem with that. I said, I could walk into a command. I don't need a uniform. I don't need a shirt on. They knew I was the boss because I tried to be a leader. Not trying to toot my own horn, but that's what you want to be. You want to be a leader.